spend time with you. My name is Sue Lisa, and I'm a senior justice on the Oregon Supreme Court. Beth?
Hi, my name is Beth Ratway. I'm a senior technical assistance consultant for the American Institutes for Research.
I'm John Deloach. I am the senior staff attorney for the South Carolina Association of Counties.
So we can't hear you.
Oh, we haven't spoken.
Oh no, I was waiting
No.
for Stu.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why it went back on mute. We would like to meet you.
I'm Jessica Petrie. I'm a senior here at Green River High School. My name is Emma Christiansen. I'm also a senior here. And I'm Abby Atkinson, and I am also a senior.
Great to meet you. Today we are doing question 1 in Unit 2, which I will now read. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? We look forward to hearing your responses.
The 55 constitutional delegates were composed of both delegates for and against the national government from the North and the South, which fostered many disagreements on how the nation should be governed.
The way states should be represented was one of these debates, particularly between the delegates from small and large states. The second layer of the debate was over who would be counted towards a state's population for representation.
The northern states advocated for only counting free people, but the southern states, who were over 40% non-white slaves at the time, wanted those people to count towards the population to gain more power in government.
The 3/5 compromise was considered necessary to convince both the southern and northern states to ratify the Constitution.
The existence of slavery itself was also a conflict.
At the time, slave labor was the economic foundation of the southern states' existence.
In addition, the North's opposition to slavery, well rooted in a moral belief in freedom, also was based in political advantage, economic factors relative to the North's success, racism, and the creation of a new American ideology.
Lastly, the delegates at the Constitutional Convention debated over the creation of an executive branch.
The anti-federalists were extremely opposed to a strong centralized government. In turn, they believed the executive branch would breed corruption because it was allowed too much power to a small group of individuals.
In addition, they feared the Constitution would not protect the people from natural rights violations from a federal government and insisted that a Bill of Rights must be created.
The Federalists, in contrast, said that the Articles of Confederation were not viable and that no nation could prosper without a centralized federal government.
The idea of an executive branch was integral to this. In the end, the executive branch and strong central government were formed. However, they decided to establish an impeachment process, essentially, a Bill of Rights which still help us today.
Some issues remained unsolved in this time, and several even mostly remain unaddressed today.
After the Constitution was ratified, it would be another few years before the Bill of Rights was introduced.
The true civil rights problems behind slavery and the 3/5 compromise weren't treated until years after.
The powers of the president and federal government overall pushed the South to fear states' rights being taken. The presidency also wasn't under term limits until much later, which allowed for greater opportunity for corruption.
The impeachment process has as of yet not removed any president from office, even those facing great opposition. Certain aspects of the Electoral College are still contended today as well, and many citizens fear that this truly doesn't represent the people.
Most of the qualms left over these disputes and many issues that weren't solved by so-called compromises contributed to the Civil War. This war may have been inevitable with the fundamental difference in beliefs between different parts of the country, making it impossible to reach a true consensus.
Even so, it's unlikely that without compromises like this, the country would never have been created in the first place.
The Constitution is fundamentally adaptable. It's created to fit the needs of the people and grow with the new amendments necessary for our nation.
There were many flaws and disagreements within its creation, and since then, individuals, be they citizens or governmental powers, have worked to improve our government upon its basis.
Pieces of the Constitution which are found to be unethical, contrary, or even cruel, such as the 3/5 compromise, were and will continue to be superseded by amendments in order to address the morality and functionality of our democracy.
There are areas of the Constitution which ought to be amended to fit the changes that our world has undergone.
The fundamental concepts outlined in the Constitution, however, remain true to our country today.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. We will have some follow-up questions now. Beth, would you like to start?
Sure. So you said the Constitution should be adaptable and grow. And I believe you said with new amendments. Is that the only way that our Constitution can be adaptable and grow? Is it through the amendment process? Is that the only way for that to happen?
No, the interpretation of the Constitution changes constantly. And some people argue that the interpretation shouldn't change, and that's a problem within politics. However, the way that we interpret what things are saying is a way that we can change what the Constitution does for our nation as well.
And as the other person within my group said, we can find different ways in which to interpret this as time moves on. If we want to change the way in which things are worded themselves in the Constitution, the amendment process is the way to do this, however.
Who's doing the interpreting? Sorry, Abby.
No, you're good. Any person that reads the Constitution can interpret it differently, just specifically by the way it is worded.
But within the government, it's usually the Supreme Court that's going to make those decisions saying what the Constitution is and isn't meant to say.
John?
All right. If you're leaving the interpretation of the Constitution up to Supreme Court, is it time then for a constitutional convention of the states to make wholesale changes to the Constitution or even adopt a new one?
Well, as we stated at the end of our unit, there are many aspects of the Constitution, the very core beliefs that still ring true today. It's the things surrounding these core beliefs that must be adapted over time. And so this can often be done through an amendment process or even through the process of making laws, which will be able to be created in which to adapt the way we see the world and the way we see the Constitution.
Could you be more specific about when you, I don't know what core beliefs you're talking about.
Well, the belief in freedom, for one, and the idea of having a democracy and having these different branches of the government, which will be able to balance each other.
The Constitution also has a lot of emphasis on the system of federalism that separates the powers of who has what power to do what things within our nation.
In your opening presentation, you made reference to a new American ideology, but didn't finish the thought. What were you referring to?
The reference to a new American ideology was the ideology that people were adapting back then when the Constitution was first created. This change in ideology was on things and ideas such as slavery, which people were beginning to question. And this is the change in ideology to which we were referring.
Okay, slavery was a hotly contested issue at the convention. There was no uniformity of opinion on that. There's nothing new about differences of opinion on slavery. It's been there from the beginning. Help me more with what this new American ideology is.
Well, the basis of this idea of a new American ideology isn't built fundamentally on the idea of differences in concepts of slavery. It's built upon the fact that we were creating a new nation. We had to come up with an ideology for this nation, founded in equality, freedom, and the separation of powers.
Okay, and have we succeeded? And I asked, I don't mean that in a cynical way. I'll just start with separation of powers. It looks as though power is shifting to the executive branch at such breathtaking speed that the drafters of the Constitution probably wouldn't even recognize. What's going on?
I think that the Constitution is upholding it as the best that we could. However, there's definitely a shift of power to the executive branch. I don't think that was intended by the founders of the Constitution, and that would be something that we'd need to further clarify to change to adapting times. Like with the presence of social media changing the way that the presidential elections look, it comes in to make it so that the people who are in office can manipulate the way that the Constitution is written to change the ways that the power is given to the executive branch. And that's how they get more power through that. So I don't think that specific part would be working right now.
Okay. Beth?
Okay, what about,
Or John? Go
That's
ahead.
fine. Go ahead.
what about the idea that there are a lot of local voters who argue now that too much authority, too much power is being drained from the states and given that to either Congress or the president. Are states losing too much of their own sovereignty?
Well, this was actually one of the arguments that happened during the original convention, and it's still something that we do contend with today. They weren't able to completely solve for the issues of certain of the main government powers gaining too much power and the executive branch gaining too much power. However, they did put in place that Bill of Rights to make sure they wouldn't be able to take too many of an individual's rights. And we have the process of amendments, as we have stated, and this can be used in order to create a better balance of power with the executive branch because they did foresee such issues taking place.
But didn't the Bill of Rights put handcuffs on the states? Just to exactly John's point.
The Bill of Rights was put in place to help individuals. And so a lot of times these individuals needed this in order to keep their power within the governmental system. So these governments weren't really having handcuffs put on them. They were having this done so that they could do what was best for each individual citizen within the United States.
The Bill of Rights protects individuals, I thought. And the Bill of Rights has been incorporated against the states to limit what states can do with respect to individual rights. That feels like handcuffs if I'm in a state, especially if I'm in a state legislature.
Well, the thing is that these powers are things that we should not be giving to states if they are fundamentally disrupting a person's rights. The fact is that the government is created to provide for the people within a nation. And so if the government is not providing for this, then they are not a good government. So if the states wish to break a fundamental right, then they should not be, then they are not fulfilling their right as a government.
The government's first priority should be to its people.
What would you say then are the powers of the states?
We would say that the powers of the states are to take the things that the federal government didn't directly reserve for themselves in order to prevent the suffering of the citizens. So they would have the obligation to make sure that their citizens are able to prosper and that their citizens can live, and they have to protect the Bill of Rights for those citizens as well. So they're directly responsible for the protection of those rights and making sure that they don't infringe on rights that have specifically been set and set out by the Constitution.
And yes, there have been some issues with certain states' rights being taken. And these are rights that aren't connected to the idea of individual rights. And so something like the Bill of Rights doesn't truly disrupt a state's rights in any way that really matters when it comes to the conflict between national and state rights.
Okay, that's time. Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right.
Judges, we have time for feedback.
Yes. John, would you like to start?
Sure. Your arguments were very well reasoned. And you responded to our questions well. I may disagree with you a little bit, having represent local governments. One thing is to think about is what exactly the state's powers are versus the federal government, because a lot of times this is a big issue that has been going on with at least the last 6 administrations. There are a lot of arguments that the federal government is taking more and more of the sovereignty that should be considered reserved by the states, such as there are some states that want to regulate environmental regulations that the federal government regulates now. There are a lot of states that if they feel that the federal government is just not enforcing laws that they should be allowed to enforce them in their absence, where the federal government has said no. So I want you to think about that and the kind of the balancing between the two.
Beth?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for a thoughtful discussion. I know that's tough, right? But the only reason it's tough is because we're pushing you because you took us there, and it's good. It's good conversations. And you should feel good about what you've presented, how your thoughtful answers, how passionate you are in terms of the work, and guiding us through the question. I'm not sure I got a full answer to the second bullet because you talked about the adaptability, the growing with new amendments. I'm not sure you gave me enough to what are some real concrete things that you think need to be changed to move forward. You gave us some nuggets in the follow-up. You know, you started talking about freedom, democracy, branches of government, federalism. But we needed to kind of pull that out. So as you're presenting and talking about these big ideas like core beliefs or new American ideology, your best bet is to define it how you want to define it, so then we can unpack it together with you, whether it be, you know, then talking about equality, freedom, and separation of powers and how that relates back to what you're saying and the question itself. I think you really did a nice job. You really helped us understand how you're thinking and why you're thinking that way. So I appreciated the conversation.
I'm going to echo Beth's observations and add a few of my own. I love your optimism. Things are getting better all the time. Things are getting better and better through amendments. We've worked with one team today who said, we took a giant step backward with the 17th Amendment, that took power away from state legislatures, and that was just a misconceived notion. So it would be fun to get the two teams together and have you debate that. Where I would push you is on a couple of places. One is when you throw out concepts and terms, you got to fill in the blanks for us. This new American ideology just went right past me because I didn't know where you were going with it. You have some aspects of the Electoral College that you have disagreements with, but I don't know what. Gotta fill in those blanks. And here's the point, and maybe I'm now just echoing John a bit. The states came to the Constitutional Convention as sovereign, independent nations. Article 1 starts with all legislative power herein granted. The federal government didn't take away all the power and then decide what to give back to the states. Just the opposite. And your optimism that we have become one people, one nation, where the nation speaks and then the states just kind of trickle along afterwards. I don't think that's quite who we are yet. But the point is that you've got a great theory going, and where I'm trying to push you is respecting that theory, that the national government speaks for the country as a whole, and develop it and get the legs underneath it so that people like John and I can't pick on you. You're really smart, and I just look forward to hearing you put those legs on for us so that that we really have a full respect and understanding of your position. Thanks for a very engaging presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Okay, judges, I'm going to open up the breakout room for you, and thank you so much for judging for us.
Everyone have a nice rest of your day.
Okay, thank you so much. I wish you guys the best of luck and your team good luck. Have a great day.
Thank you.